Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be reacting to
Why Southern Italians went to the US and Northerners went to Argentina and Brazil.
The Italian American slang word of the day is ugats. Ugats.
Little Italy. Is that in New York?
Italian Americans are Southern Italians adapted to the North American context.
Mi ricordo di quando i miei fratelli erano tosatei.
Being originally from Northern Italy, Italian Brazilians don't even eat pasta.
Interesting.
I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but when you hear the surnames of famous Italian Americans such as, I don't know, Sinatra or Cuomo, which is Cuomo in Italian, or Rigitano, which is the real last name of Pope Leo, as I explained in this other video that I link in the description down below, they always sound very, very Southern Italian because 95% of the time these families originally came from Southern Italy.
I mean, makes sense because we know there's more poverty in Southern Italy, so people fled for better opportunities. I get that. Now, I don't get the part why from Northern Italy they went to Argentina and Brazil. That part we need to find out.
On the other hand, if we look at famous Brazilians or Argentines of Italian descent, like former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro or Pope Francis Jorge Bergoglio, we find something completely different. The vast majority of these surnames originally came from the north of Italy. But why is that? Why did so many Italian immigrants to North America originally came from
Also interesting that you can distinguish where the person is from based on the last name. That's also kind of interesting.
Southern Italy, while those who went to Latin America, on the contrary, were from the north? Today, we're gonna find out, but before that, please, if you like my work and the research behind these videos, which is a lot, subscribe to the channel and activate the notification button. Now let's dive in. As many of my subscribers who are descendants of Italians know very, very well, between the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th, Italy was characterized by an unprecedented migratory phenomenon, the so-called Italian diaspora, the story of many of you. Just between 1860, 1 year before the Italian unification, and the start of World War I in 1914, 16 million Italians emigrated and 9 of them left Italy permanently, mostly traveling to North and South America. According to another study, the numbers may have been even higher, 14 million from 1876 to 1914, and annual emigration averaged almost 220,000 in the period 18...
I mean, today too, a lot of Italians are leaving. We saw the video that it's also a lot of immigration going on.
76 to
The cycle repeats, maybe.
1900, and almost 650,000 from 1901 through 1915. To give you an idea of the extent of this phenomenon, it is enough to say that in the symbolic year 1900, the beginning of the 20th century, the total Italian population amounted to just over 33 million. This means that in that period between the two centuries, almost half of Italians emigrated.
Italian emigration was not a choice, it was a cry. A desperate answer to misery, to hunger, to the crushing weight of hopelessness. For millions of Italians, the only horizon left was the sea.
But unlike what many foreigners, but also many Italians think, the first big wave of migration between 1876 and 1900 affected northern Italy much more than the south, traditionally considered poorer and more backward. In the 1870s and 1880s, both the poorest regions of northeastern Italy, like Veneto and Friuli, but also the richest of the northwest, such as Lombardy and Piedmont, were hit hard by a deep agricultural crisis. These areas had been traditionally dependent on small-scale farming, but new international competition.
I wonder back then, how do you know like about the foreign land, like about America, like no TVs, obviously no internet, like no nothing. How do you know to go to like America? Oh, like it's gonna be better there, or like not America, Argentina and Brazil. Like how did the information travel? Like that's always for me is like very fascinating because back in the day, like they didn't even have cars really. Like what 1876, like so how?
I think like for trade and word of mouth.
Has to be word of mouth.
Falling prices and outdated land structures pushed thousands into poverty. At the same time, as I explained in these two videos that I link in the description down below, countries like Argentina and Brazil were actively recruiting European labor to develop their agriculture and expand their economies.
Booking.com has all kinds of stays.
Also,
For
so
those who
how do you
love
do
family
recruiting,
resorts,
like
and for
in
those
foreign countries? Like, it's just so interesting.
These governments were offering land, free or subsidized transport, and sometimes even cash incentives
There you
to attract
go.
settlers, the so-called sponsor
There you
migration.
go.
Obviously, you commuted via boat. That's part, yes, but it's like, how do you know about? I don't know. It's just fascinating.
You hear
to me.
about the
Especially to northern
opportunities.
Italians who were seen as more white, more civilized than southerners, Catholic.
But then people must come back too to get oh, this is like that in America. So there were people coming back, because otherwise, like, everybody just leaves. You don't fucking know they died in the water, died on the boat, fell off into the Atlantic.
Hardworking and used to work in large agricultural plains that were common to both the Po Valley and the Latin American plains. Agents were sent to rural villages in Veneto, Lombardy, and Piedmont, offering free passage, contracts, and land to cultivate. For poor peasants devastated by the agricultural crisis, this was an offer they couldn't refuse. And that's how hundreds of thousands of northern Italians ended up
So
in
there was people, he said agents, like incentivizing people to come. That's interesting.
Brazil and Argentina, forming the cultural backbone of these two countries, with subsequent waves of migration.
But
Also
why
southern
Italy?
Italians
Why not?
arrived to Latin America, but especially in the particular case of Brazil,
Spain?
those northern Italian cultural traits remained very strong and characterizing. And let me know in the comments if you are Latin Americans from northern Italian origin.
That's a lot. Holy shit.
During the second part of the Italian diaspora, which occurred at the beginning of the 20th century, emigration from southern Italy, that until then had been a minority, exploded. This shift was caused by a combination of deep economic and social issues. After the unification of Italy, the South, already struggling, was hit by new taxes, land reforms that failed to help small farmers, and a general lack of industrial development. Most southern Italians were landless peasants working on large estates owned by absentee landlords, with little hope of improving their condition. Meanwhile, the population was growing rapidly, putting even more pressure, and natural disasters like the 1908 earthquake in Messina and Reggio Calabria made things worse. At the same time, the most popular destinations for Italian immigrants in the late 19th century, Brazil and Argentina, had
Oh no, because I thought he was gonna say something specifically.
already begun putting restrictions on immigration. So when the great wave of southern Italian migration started, the doors of Latin America were closing. On the other hand, the United States was becoming a major actor on the international scene, experiencing a rapid industrial growth and an enormous demand for labor. This combination of push factors in Italy and pull factors in the US drove millions of southern Italians to leave their homeland and settle primarily in North America. And this is the story of many of you guys who are watching this video. I can see your last names in the comments. Italy is one of the highest varieties of surnames in the world, with a huge difference between North and South, and every little village has its own typical, and it's very easy for me to spot where you guys were originally from. Campania.
That's cool.
That's interesting that each region has a last name. Yeah, I don't. Wow. It's very interesting.
Sicily, Abruzzo, Calabria, Puglia. Your families were almost exclusively from southern Italy. According to most studies, about 4 million Italians arrived at Ellis Island between 1900 and 1920. The last year, the United States adopted an open immigration policy before strong restrictions took place. And looking at the records in the Ellis Island archive, including those of my descendants, it is striking to notice that 95% of the surnames come from the former Bourbon Kingdom, from southern Italy in short, and a very similar story involved Canada. There too, even if with different timing and figures, Italian immigration was almost exclusively from the south, from Calabria in particular. And in my family there are also some Toronto Italians originally from Calabria that I'm trying to contact through social media. And if you are interested in the history of the Italian immigration to Canada as I am, please check out this video that I link in the description down below.
So he helps people locate their families.
I guess, yeah.
Immigration from southern Italy to North America presented two fundamental differences compared to that from northern Italy to Latin America. The first is represented by the fact that while Venetians, Piedmontese and Lombards who went to Argentina and Brazil, especially at the beginning, became farmers and often owners of vast arable lands, the Italians who went to North America were employed almost exclusively and in very difficult working conditions as unskilled workers in the factories of the large cities on the Atlantic coast. The only partial exception to this rule was that of the Italians in California, and if you're interested in this story, please check out this other video. Another huge difference between Italian immigration to North and South America was represented by the integration within the
Do
host
you know
countries.
any like Italians in California? I don't really know. Mostly here they just go to New York.
Yeah, when you think of Italians, you think of New York.
Yeah.
That's Staten Island, New Jersey. Now
Yeah,
he
New
then you
Jersey.
know in Miami too, like they come down to like in Florida.
Oh yeah.
But
Mm.
yeah, that's the only places when you think of Italians.
Mm.
In California, no, I don't think of California as
Mm-mm.
Italians. No, more like Armenians. If like in California, I feel like.
The northern Italians who went to Latin America generally integrated very well. As mentioned, they were perceived as white, they were Catholics, and speakers of Roman languages and dialects similar to Spanish and Portuguese. It was a very peaceful process overall. For southern Italian immigrants to North America, as your grandfathers and great-grandfathers know very, very well, the story was unfortunately very different.
Subway's footlongs are packed with protein, like the Ultimate BMT or the All-Pro Sweet Onion Chicken Teriyaki.
The integration of southern Italians into North America was extremely difficult. Generally darker-skinned, Catholic, speaking dialects of Italian that were the antithesis of English, for many decades, southern Italians were not even considered white by the Anglo-Saxon majority and were subjected to very serious racial discrimination, including lynching and other types of physical aggression. And even today that the situation has improved dramatically, this enormous difficulty in integrating into the North American mainstream has left Italian-American communities with a strong sense of another identity, of diversity, of distinct
I wonder if I
southern
will notice the difference between a northern Italian versus a southern Italian.
I have no idea.
Italian heritage. As an Italian, when I speak to Italian Americans or Italian Canadians, when I observe them, I still see very strongly those Southern Italian traits. Italian Americans are Southern Italians adapted to the North American context, but those influences are definitely still there in the food, in the way, like I do, of gesturing with their hands, in the way of dressing, in the incredible influence of Southern Italian dialects into Italian American slang.
I turned to him and said, Pop, ma che fai? American.
On the contrary, when I see, for example, a Brazilian of Italian Venetian origin, I observe completely different things. He's still Italian, but in a very, very different way. For example, he doesn't do any hand gestures. When he speaks a dialect derivating from Venetian called Talian, which would be completely incomprehensible to Italian Americans. He doesn't even eat pasta, the symbol of Italian Americans, because his ancestors
So
back in the day exclusively ate rice and polenta. And he's also visually very different.
Mi ricordo de quando mie e miei fratelli erano tosatei. Di sta se andai a do a giocare con gli amici tutta la mattina per dopo tornare a casa al mesdì. E il nonno
No, that
tornava
sounds
sempre
different. David
dall'orto con
sounds
sacco di
Portuguese.
patate, segole, fasui.
That's kind of sound Portuguese. I ain't gonna lie. Yeah, now that you said it, yeah, a little bit.
This variety and cultural differences within the Italian diaspora are extremely fascinating to me. Let me know in the comments if you perceive them as
Huh, very interesting video. That was very cool. Wow.
Guys, of course, let us know your thoughts. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Join the Discord. And as always, share as much kindness as possible.